Hello and welcome to M&A, the framework for a successful transition and integration. I'm joined today by some colleagues of mine here at FPTransitions. Joining me is James Fisher, who is an attorney at FPTransitions, one of the partners at the firm and head of our M&A division. Also joining us is Eric Leeper, CFA, who is also a partner in the organization and heads up a lot of our consulting work, particularly succession planning teams. And then joining us from outside FPTransitions is Liv Olson of Liv Olson Consulting. Liv's been consulting on HR and operational issues with advisors and actually of multiple industries for nearly 20 years. And she brings a lot of expertise in change management and executive consulting. And we thought this would be a great opportunity to talk not just about some of the complex things that go into an M&A transaction from a numbers perspective, but what are those things that go beyond the numbers? If you look across our industry right now, there's consolidation happening everywhere, and you don't have to look far to see M&A happening among advisors, among FinTechs, broker-dealers. Certainly some custodians have been at it lately. Some of these have gone well, and others have left some clients of these businesses kind of scratching their heads and looking at alternatives because the integrations after the M&A transaction haven't gone so well. So we're going to talk about some of the lessons advisors can learn from these and some success stories and lessons learned from advisors that both Liv and FPTransitions have worked with. So one of the most overlooked components of a successful M&A transaction isn't necessarily the multiples or the deal terms that get all the press. It's those human capital elements. And so we've spoken plenty in the past on transactions in past webinars we've done or white papers we've put out. But really the full success of a transaction lies in its transition and integration. So today we're going to outline 3 phases of a successful M&A transition and integration and the 3 keys to success in incorporating each of those within each phase. Lastly, we'll discuss what action items advisors should take before beginning an M&A transaction. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Scott Leek. I'm a senior consultant here at FPTransitions, and I head up our business development team. Getting into the meat of kind of this fireside chat we're doing here today, I mentioned we're going to talk about 3 phases to M&A, and those are pre-work, process, and then the post-integration. And within each of those phases, there's 3 keys to success that run through each. And it's identifying the challenges during that phase, identifying the opportunities in that phase, and then having the right communication between all parties when you're working pre, during, and post-integration. So let's start a little bit. I'll turn to the panel here and just kind of ask, when it comes to that first part of the pre-work, before an M&A deal is really kind of going down the aisle, what are some of the challenges that might be encountered? So James, I'll maybe start with you. How do you know as an advisor that you're about to go into a transition that this is the right fit?
It's a great question, and it's something we typically spend a bit of time with prospective clients on. I think about it kind of from 2 broad categories. The first kind of thought process that an advisor contemplating M&A needs to think about is, are they ready? And that's a question that only they can answer, but it's something that we can help them analyze. They don't have to have everything figured out at the outset, but they have to be ready to embark on this journey. If you're not, then it's probably not the right time. This isn't a kicking the tires exercise. It is a process that you have to be ready for, because for some people, it's an emotional roller coaster. I mean, these are businesses that they have spent their entire lives building. It has become their identity. And, the process of finding a partner for your firm, again, can be emotional. And I use the term partner strategically here. There are some folks out there that refer to M&A as buyers and sellers. To me, that's more of a financial transaction when you use those terms. I like to use the term partner because what we're looking for for an advisor is a true partner for their organization. And I'm sure we'll get more granular as we get into the conversation here today and unpack that a bit more. The second part of the kind of two-part process here in terms of the analysis is the type of partner you're seeking. So first, are you even ready to embark on this journey? And if the answer to that is yes, then what type of partner are you looking for? Because you need to understand the why behind the journey to know what you're trying to solve for. Again, we'll unpack that as we continue through the conversation today, but that is the initial outset of our conversation with a firm that is looking at exploring what partnerships look like in the marketplace.
Yeah, and just to build on what James said, we do have a framework for helping our clients who might be thinking about this process to start to break down all of the different stakeholders and put more clarity to the question of if they're prepared or not. And the reality is that it's not just the advisor who has built their practice and their partner who is going to integrate that practice. There are other stakeholders at the table. You have staff that are important. You have your immediate nuclear family who might be relying on the economics of this transaction, and also importantly on what your role is post-transaction. So are you going to continue on in the same capacity? Do you have a health issue that may need to be accommodated, or do you simply just want to work less but not retire completely? And then also importantly, which goes without saying, is it good for the client? So we call those the three families. It's the clients, the staff, and your nuclear family. And if you can't get all of those interests aligned and you haven't actually gone through the intellectual exercise of thinking about how this transaction impacts all of those different stakeholders, then you're not prepared. And just like James said, most of our clients are not prepared. Through our discussions with them, we're going to start to uncover where these fit elements make sense, where they might not make sense, where maybe one of their objectives is completely incongruent with another objective, and we solution around those different items. So that's how we get our clients prepared to undertake this transaction, which may be the most important transaction of their lives.
And just to add a little bit more to that, the clients that come to us, we don't listen to them and say, great, you've told us you want to explore what a merger or an acquisition looks like. Let's put our blinders on and let's run down that path. We listen to what they have to say, but we need to understand the why they want to do this, why they want to explore this path, and also the what of what they're trying to solve for. Because there have been certain fact patterns where clients have come to us and said, we think we want to explore an external M&A transaction. After we explored what that meant with them a little bit further, they actually decided to explore an internal succession before they decided to further explore external. So again, we want to have that conversation with them to make sure that they understand the optionality that's available to them, because they may not know the paths that they have. And we're a full service consulting firm here. We really do enjoy the consultative nature of the work we do, and we like to ensure that our clients are making the decisions they're making with all available information.
Liv, when someone reaches out to you, I imagine most of the time they're doing so because they've already reached a point where they've got a problem. And so when you think about before an M&A transaction occurs in this kind of pre-work phase and thinking about things like, are we prepared? Are we ready? To James's point, what are the things that advisors should think about that might help prevent those problems that they come to you for, that if they had come to you sooner, maybe it wouldn't have become a problem in the first place?
Yeah, thanks for that. The first thing that comes to mind really is being honest with themselves in this early phase, honest with themselves about these questions about why. Both James and Eric did a great job laying that out, and being clear about what are either my or our, as a team, non-negotiables as we approach this. Being clear about what do we believe, what do we care about, what's most important as we really embark on a giant change process. I mean, change is hard enough in a highly functional organization on a good day. But when we take that same philosophy around managing organizational change and layer on the complexities of a partner in the transition and all various stakeholder groups compounded that Eric laid out, it takes some wherewithal and honesty about the discomfort that might come as it unfolds.
So as we shift to start to think about, there's certainly challenges that can come with doing an M&A transaction. It's usually the opportunities that people get most excited about and why they want to do it in the first place. So, Eric, I'll start with you on this one. We do a lot of work with advisors on internal succession plans, but those don't always work out. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, we end up seeing advisors, try an internal succession or even implement one, but then for one reason or another have to go and do a full-blown M&A transaction externally. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about the opportunities that are present there, and particularly, the term that we use is a sell and stay, where mm-hmm. it's not necessarily they're quitting and walking away, but if you could elaborate on that, I think that could help highlight some of the opportunities in this pre-work phase.
Yeah, absolutely. And to talk about sell and stay and some of those other specific, types of transactions that we put together, we need to go back to the foundation, which is looking at those stakeholder groups. The reason why most advisors like to use internal succession as a first step is because it accomplishes their objective, which might be to transition out of the business over a period of time with the least amount of disruption, right? An internal succession means I'm going to make someone who is a more junior person in my practice an actual equity owner. The challenges that are around that is that they can take a very long period of time, and those people don't necessarily work out. But if we look at the intention is to transition the business with the least amount of disruption. So what can happen is if that G2 team doesn't ultimately work out, it doesn't change the objective of the original advisor to transition the practice over time. It just might accelerate the timeline. It might cause them to look for a better strategic solution. And it used to be that 10 years ago, that solution wasn't available. It was either pure internal or pure external. And what's happened is the deal terms have evolved to accommodate a much wider net of potential strategic partners, right? So we coined the term sell and stay to describe any transaction which was fundamentally an asset sale. I'm selling my practice to another larger strategic partner, but I'm going to continue to work in the practice for a period of time. So normally that means that there's a longer tail on the participation with the acquiring practice. That's why we call it sell and stay, right? You sell the practice and you stay working for a period of time. The reason why this is a good response to internal succession plans that haven't worked out is because I'm with the practice for a longer period of time. In many cases, I'm taking equity in exchange for my value, which means I'm a stakeholder in the success of the transaction for a much longer period of time. And in a lot of cases, by picking the right partner, I get to determine what I want my work week to look like. So what we can do is we can take those foundational elements of those stakeholder groups and say, my objectives have not changed. I'm just going to use a different strategic partner to accomplish them. And I would say, to characterize most of the transactions that we've done in the last 5 years, they have been described as sell and stays. Yep. I also importantly want to talk about the existence of the G2. Just because someone engages in a transaction with an external partner that is not a G2, which is a bigger strategic acquirer, does not mean the succession plan has failed. They may have run out of time. Their objectives may have changed. They may have had a health issue. In a lot of cases, we can take that G2 with us. So to say an internal succession plan has failed, very few of them fail. What they do is they run out of time, or those objectives cause them to seek a different external partner. And we bring that G2 with us as part of the transaction, and we give them a seat at the table in the discussion.
It's a course correction.
It's a course correction. That's exactly right.
Or it's a hybrid plan. I mean, the dichotomy here is an internal succession versus external succession. You can accomplish the ideas of an internal succession also while exploring an external partner. But again, it goes back to the why you're looking for an external partner. A lot of these firms realize some of these partners out there provide them resources that it would take years to build on their own. So you still have your internal succession team that's working together, but you overlay this partner that comes in and helps support your local team and help spur growth and other things. So again, I don't like to think about it as you're doing one or the other, because there is this middle ground between the two thought processes.
And often that first strategy can be enhanced by the second strategy, meaning that, you know, perhaps, obviously, it depends on the situation, but G2 might benefit greatly from having this transaction unfold. There might be bigger opportunities. There might be ways that they can make greater impact more quickly in their careers. They might, you know, have a number of different kinds of opportunities to spread their wings and grow in different ways. So I think the framing toward, you know, how does this help us all win, and how does this help us have greater impact across our stakeholders?
And Lev, I think that's a great point. If you look at some of the largest firms out there in this space, the ones that, you know, you regularly hear about that are acquiring other firms, a lot of the folks on that executive team are there because of an acquisition they did with their firm. You know, again, the executive team of many of these firms is filled with folks that came to that organization through an acquisition. So that's a really good point, that, you know, G2s can be provided with opportunities that they weren't going to have in the organization that they originally joined.
James, when we were talking about the challenges, one of the things that was mentioned was non-negotiables. So can you, let's get into some meat here a little bit. Can you give some specific examples of non-negotiables that organizations should determine? And then how does this then contribute to where we're going to go next of effective communication during this process?
Yeah, and that's part of that self-assessment that a firm should be doing. You know, non-negotiables for one firm are going to differ. That there, you know, there is not a list of 5 non-negotiables everyone should be thinking about, but, you know, some of the things that rise to the top of the list are culture, you know, client experience, you know, the type of investment philosophy that you've deployed. Those are things that should be non-negotiable. And the reason being, it goes back to the stakeholder groups that Eric's talked about earlier. Your clients are a stakeholder group here. You need to find a firm that is going to provide them best-in-class services going forward. And if you've taken one approach for your clients for the last 30 years, and there's a fundamental shift of that approach with a partner firm, probably not going to be a good outcome. So, you know, focusing on the clients and also the staff, you know, non-negotiables for me are, you know, what is in the best interest of your team. And if the partner firm that you're in talks with isn't going to provide your team with growth opportunities that they're excited about, that's a non-negotiable.
Yeah, you and I were talking just a couple days ago about, we had a deal that just closed that almost fell apart because at the last minute there was some miscommunication that the seller was going to have their client's prices raised immediately, and the seller's like, no, this could ruin the deal, and this was a deal that we've been working on for 2 years, but this was a non-negotiable, and these types of things are important for advisors to think about before going in, of like, I'm not going to budge on this. This is a non-negotiable that we need to get out there and communicate. So Lev, I want to ask you kind of on this last point when it comes to communication in this pre-phase. There's kind of this spectrum, if you will, between secrecy and full transparency. So where should advisors land on this spectrum as they're starting to engage in M&A discussions?
Such a complicated answer. I appreciate it very much. Obviously,
that's what I was thinking.
With the consultative lens, you know, it's all going to depend on the situation, the partner, if you're the buyer, if you're seller, if you're looking for a merger partner. These are all considerations that are important here. And, you know, I mean, as a change management consultant, I am 100% usually flying the flag of communicate often, communicate early, do it skillfully, and, you know, more is more. And in these types of situations, a completely different stance is required, which is what's necessary for people to know at this stage, and managing the amount of disruption that is caused by uncertainty. We know that the human brain, our human brains and our nervous systems will respond less favorably to a certain unfavorable outcome that we know about versus uncertainty. Uncertainty is the worst. So we want to manage around that. And the way that I suggest that folks think about this and approach it is, number one, doing the hard work of at each phase, who needs to be involved? Who do we want to invite, into this kind of exploration if you're buying or selling? Who needs to be at the table, so to speak? There's a functional aspect to that. There's a buy-in aspect to that. But outside of that group, what do you want to share? And is it causing more disruption to be more transparent than perhaps waiting till the time is appropriate? And when the time is appropriate to begin sharing, even if there are not a lot of details, like you can't you can't share a roadmap, you can't give a timeline, you're not quite ready to get into the details. Focus on the things that you are able to share that give some level of knowing what to expect. So this might sound like, hey, here's what you can count on from us in this communication strategy.
I like that.
Know that we will come to you as we're able with more details. Know that we're making the decisions that are right for everyone involved. Know that we're moving toward a bright future that looks like these types of things.
So you gave me a perfect segue to our next segment. So when you move from the pre-work to the process, one of those early challenges determining what parties should be in the tent or have a seat at the table. So James, what guidance do you give when you've got a firm that's got multiple stakeholders internally about who gets to seat at the table? Is it just the owners, or is there more to it than that?
I'm going to answer your question, but I do want to back up for one second. And, most of the discussions that we've had around the pre-work thus far were focused on a firm looking for a partner. I don't want to overlook the pre-work just really quickly that a firm out there looking to participate in the M&A side of things from an acquiring standpoint should be doing. They shouldn't at least wake up one day and get caught up in the frenzy of M&A and have this fear of missing out and just start calling people to see if they want to join their organization. They need to put more thought into it than that. Seen way too many fact patterns where it feels like the firm that comes to us with an LOI is the proverbial dog that caught the car. They went out there, they canvassed the marketplace, then they found someone who wanted to join their organization, but had no idea what to do next. It's really important that you put some thought into what you want the firms that you're asking to join your organization, what they look like, who they are, what their investment philosophy is. And it's also really important that you have an integration plan built before you get to the time implementing that plan. This isn't a time to, work on the airplane while you're flying it. Use that analogy all the time. You probably see the airplane behind me. I'm a commercial pilot and fly often, so I like to use a lot of aviation analogies. But again, this is not the time to deploy that as a strategy if you're looking at acquiring firms in this space. So
I'm going to call out, just because you brought up such a good point here. We have a wonderful resource on acquisition readiness. So I'm just saying this to kind of tag our editors of this to make sure we include that resource along with the other resources after this webinar. But okay, so question being then, how do parties make the right decisions about who's at the table?
Yeah, great question. And I think Lee brought up a bunch of good thoughts as to how that should be analyzed, because every advisor team that we work with knows their staff and their employees best. So we don't have a one size fits all. This is the exact moment in time where you should tell your team. some have told their team before they even come to us with the thought process of, we want to explore external partnership opportunities. And they're part of that conversation early on. Others wait until, an asset purchase agreement is signed and the transaction is going to happen in 2 weeks. I don't think that's the right approach, just to be clear. But to Lee's point, you want to avoid talking about your transaction or your thoughts around doing a partnership with an external firm without having some answers to your staff and your employees. Because of course, when you broach this subject with them, their first concern is going to be, what does that mean for me? Am I going to have a job? What is my role going to look like? What is my comp going to look like? And if you don't have any color around those topics, it's going to create more concern and more anxiety. So we like to wait until you're, at least somewhat evolved in your thought process, and you have a few firms that you've had conversations with, and you could see a path with these firms as being potential partners for you. And we think that's a great time to bring at least important team members into that conversation, because you don't want to feel like you're doing this in a vacuum. You don't want to feel like, you don't want to make a decision where you haven't provided them an opportunity to give insight as to whether this is the right path, because again, they are a stakeholder here. It needs to be a partner that they're excited about and it's going to provide them with opportunities. And if you don't give them that chance to voice their opinion, it could have negative consequences for the transaction that you're trying to enter into.
Yeah, and I would say, just to put a finer point on that, and this is going to be different, as James, as you point out, we see the whole spectrum of engaging the broader team, but I like to be a little bit more specific. As soon as you can project confidence in the process and the outcomes, to be able to ease those concerns about the uncertainty, that's generally when we see people brought in. There's another category, as James mentioned, which is as soon as you need to seek input to be able to build that confidence and project that is important. It is not always appropriate to paint in a broad brush and saying all partners of the, for example, an 80% owner who can independently direct the direction of the company may not bring in the 10% partners for the initial conversations, but we would expect them to come in shortly after because they're an integral part of that transaction. So to me, it's about confidence. As soon as we can build that confidence about those outcomes in the mind of a party being acquired, then that's generally when I say bring in the rest of the team.
And that's a good point, Eric. There's some layers here. I mean, you may bring some of your team members in the conversation earlier, and you may wait on some of those team members, given their role in the organization and sometimes given their tenure with you. I mean, if they are a trusted confidant of yours and have been for the last 20 years, you're probably going to bring them into the fold earlier on, as opposed to someone who joined your firm 2 months ago.
Yeah. One more lens here that, just as a kind of a first step, is, who are the functional leaders that are going to be involved in the work, that are going to have the input that's the most valuable in order to discern, what fit really looks like. The earlier you can involve those folks and feels appropriate to involve those folks, that's really going to help momentum and buy-in, because buy-in is contagious. And they're most likely, as functional leaders, to be front runners of change, adopters of change.
That's a great point.
Lev, I know you've said in the past too that there's certain do's and don'ts that when you're at this part in the process that people need to think about. One of them, I remember you telling me before, is that, not getting to know each other well enough when you got two different parties, because when this deal gets done, particularly if it's a merger or, if it's a sell and stay where someone's going to be around for a while, like, you're going to work with this person for quite some time. This isn't a one-time transaction. So what are some of the things that you would encourage them to do in terms of, like, how do you get to know each other well? And what are some things to think about there beyond the numbers?
And again, good question. And part of why I love FPTransitions is the language you guys use, the emphasis on partnership. And I think that that's a good one to think about here is if we're engaging in a partnership, whether it's a partnership through a process, a transaction, and then, maybe I'm retiring or, exiting or whatever, that process is still a partnership. And how do we get to know each other to the extent that we're going to be able to navigate this partnership for a period of time and perhaps much longer? And the number one way is spending time together. Not just, drinks after the meeting or a fancy dinner, but truly spending some time getting to know each other, and not leaning on likability. I mean, likability is great and fun, and certainly we want to work with people we like. That's a nice to have. And just because we like someone doesn't necessarily mean that they address conflict well, that they can be open and clear in their communication, that they have control and management over their own emotions when things are feeling intense or there's a high stakes kind of conflict going on. So some of the principles that apply in behavioral interviewing when we're, interviewing folks to join our team, I think it's constructive. Tell me about a time when, explain how you navigated a change. In your leadership style, how do you hold difficult conversations among many different team members who have differing opinions? I think psychological safety this is a perfect time to talk about how you foster psychological safety across a highly integrated leadership team when there's interdependence. Is it okay to, talk about differing points of view, to push back, to bring up a point of view that might be contrary to the flow of conversation? Do you hold mental models for a long time or grudges? Or do you have some fluidity about how you view your teammates as they evolve, as you evolve? What do you do for your own personal growth and professional growth?
Those are outstanding examples. Thank you. And, you lead me to something that I want to ask James about, because, this is something I hear you reference a lot. And that is, language matters when we're talking about these things. And the word merger sometimes gets thrown around incorrectly. I mean, there is such a thing as a statutory merger that is not necessarily how some people mean it. But I've heard you say an acquisition can feel like a merger. Elaborate on that for us.
Yeah, when most people think of merger, they think of kind of the tenure of the relationship. They think it's a process that's built that, you get to know each other. You're going to integrate your firm into another organization. And just to put it simply, you're going to take 1 + 1 = 3, 4, 5. You're going to have a multiplier there. Whereas most people think of a sale or a isolated acquisition as you're going to join them and you're going to then acquiesce to do everything the way the acquiring firm wants you to do. Now, those things exist. There are firms out there that feel that that is what an acquisition should look like. But the vast majority of them understand that the folks that they're bringing into their organization are business owners. They've run their own business for 30 years, and they can't bring those folks into their organization and treat them like employees. They need to have some autonomy. They need to be treated like partners. And again, it goes back to that idea that it needs to feel like you're taking that firm and the partner firm and merging them together to create a best-in-class service offering for the client. So when I say that an acquisition can feel like a merger, that's really what I mean.
Yeah, and just to again build on that, the idea of merger really softens the edges around what people tend to associate with when they say acquisition, right? Which, as James, you point out, feels more like I acquired a house, right?
Yeah.
I built something and
Perfect example.
it came with some quirks, but it didn't come with human biases, and it didn't come with a team of people.
You say, I'm done, house is acquired.
So again, we could be too technical in our language sometimes and gloss over the important parts, and that is that most of the time, these are transactions that involve huge human elements, and those humans come with biases and challenges, and all of that gets
Baggage.
wrapped up into baggage. Thank you, Scott. Great term for it. Uh, to say merger means that we know about these things and we're going to integrate them. To say acquisition, it just feels a little too sudden.
And Eric, to your point, I mean, the nomenclature in this space is mergers and acquisitions, but we typically talk about what's being done as a transaction. So we pull it away from those connotations and provide a more generic term to it, because we can take a transaction and make it what both parties want it to be, because we don't have to put it in a silo of this is a merger and this is an acquisition. So we use that term intentionally, just like we use the term partnership intentionally.
It's so refreshing to hear a lawyer say we're not going to use specific language when we talk about things, James. Sorry, I had to take the shot.
That's okay.
So before we move on to this last phase of post-integration, Liv, I really want to get your take on this, and you guys have to forgive me. I'm not able to use my AI note taker in the middle of this. I have to like use a pen and paper like some kind of animal here. So when advisors are getting together, they're going to do a merger, an acquisition, they're going to bring these two teams together. I imagine one of the most difficult things that's going to happen is figuring out who's going to lead this new organization. Because whether it's an acquisition or whether it's a merger, at the end of the day, it's still two companies that are going to become one company. So when you've got two entrepreneurs that are both used to leading, or at least two, maybe four, maybe six or eight, how do you figure that out in that early or in that mid phase of who leads next?
I think that piece is, I think it's rare. I think it's rare that there are two leaders who are actually wanting to come together as equal co-leaders. I think that generally what you find is some situation where someone's ready to step back. Someone's ready for a different type of role. Maybe they're staying on the leadership team and they're going to be managing and leading a certain functional area, whether that's business development or client service, or perhaps they have some other gift. So it really becomes a conversation about, what do you care about? What are your unique abilities? Where do you see, where do we see the future? And determining how can we work together in a way that we're leveraging our strengths and making sure that we're striving towards that common goal.
James, when you've seen these transactions come together, or the negotiations are going on, they're getting ready to maybe do the letter of intent or do that due diligence. I mean, are you finding kind of that same type of alignment, or is there still a lot of headbutting of personalities at this point?
Yeah, just given the way we do things here at FP, we see a lot of alignment when we get to the point of drafting an LOI. Our process is focused on ensuring the parties are aligned long before we get to that stage of our process. We focus on fit, and what that means is we start the conversation with trying to determine whether there's alignment between the two partners that are looking at a potential partnership here. So by the time we get to the point where we're talking about the deal terms, we've already answered the question as to whether there's alignment in the two firms and whether we think this partnership makes sense.
Yeah, I would say that one of the things that, and this is what happens when you work with people who are experienced in M&A, is we take things very procedurally in a manner to build a foundation of trust and understanding. And then once we have that foundation, what we're operating off is momentum. If you have a strong foundation and a good cultural fit and the things that James and Liv have talked about, then we try to build speed and excitement and momentum, and issues that maybe on a specific day, had you not done that pre-work, might seem like big issues, but when you put it in context of what you're trying to accomplish together and all of the ground that you've covered already and all of the things you've established and agreed on, they become very small and they lose some of their impact. And you get to a point where people start to feel a little bit more amenable. The end is in sight. this isn't such a big issue. Let's use the momentum we've built, and let's tackle this, and let's get to the next issue. So it's really important that we fall back on those foundational elements, and that we're not putting unnecessary hurdles in front of the two parties to the transaction at the inappropriate time, right? There's a time and a place to discuss these issues, and it's not always going to be the same from one transaction to another.
Yeah, and our process is built where it layers on at different stages. And again, to Eric's point, there's got to be flexibility in that process, but we want to try to keep people moving in the right direction together. So we're consultative guides. We've got to be flexible and address each of the issues that arises. There's always going to be issues. There is in every transaction, but we're there to help be that consultative guide and navigate both parties through whatever issues do arise.
And just to emphasize, one of the values working with a professional on this is objectivity. There have been many times, maybe even this week, where we've said, so-and-so, you're being unreasonable. I need you to change the language on that before we go to the counterparty, because it's not going to be received well, right? So we have this experience from doing hundreds and hundreds of transactions and talking to a lot of people about a lot of issues, to be frank.
Yeah. When we're in the midst of these really complicated transactions, it's easy to get distracted and mired into the details and the experience of the day-to-day and lose sight of the bigger picture. And so I think that, part of what we all do in that objectivity, in that kind of being the guide, is to help say, okay, when can we flex in terms of our communication and our attention to the different levels of the organization, and not levels in terms of seniority, but levels in terms of people. So, communication and attention and attuning to what is that organizational big vision. Let's make sure our team is oriented there, our organization is oriented there, our discussions at a leadership level, that we as individuals are oriented there. And with the sense of alignment, when is our operational rhythm, putting into practice, meetings, different types of communications, again, at the individual, team, and organizational level that are shorter term. Okay, this is what's happening this month. This is what's happening this quarter. We have clear guidelines, relative to these big changes that speak to what's happening kind of now in our immediate future, as well as, pulling at our hearts around what's coming in the future.
So as I look at some of the things that are happening in the industry, and some of them are very near and dear to me, you look at some M&A deals that have affected a lot of advisors, and some of them in a pretty negative way. I'm not going to name any names, but
you don't have to, Scott.
Yeah, I think we all know where this is going. So what do you do before the merger is done? Because you can have that day, that mission accomplished banner, and it's like, we did it. Conversion happened, everything went great. And then a little bit later, things start to creep up where clients might be like, oh, I didn't realize things are going to be done this way now. This is not good. I don't like this change. So what do advisors do ahead of time to make sure that those challenges are addressed before they really become issues?
For me, that's a pretty easy answer. You hire a firm like FP. We do this day in and day out. We've got processes built, and part of that process is things for them to be thinking about. I mean, I've got Excel spreadsheets that provide, questions to be asked during weekly phone calls, operational integration. I mean, we've outlined all of those things, and it's not a self-guided process. It's a process where you need a professional guide to help you think about those things for your specific firm. Because if someone just handed you a map and you had no idea how to first off use that map, you're going to end up in the wrong place. So, we have a map, but we are the professional guides to help navigate that journey with you.
Leave, I don't know, I don't even know where I'm going with this question. So this could really fail, and you'd be like, no. How much does time or timing matter when it comes to that post integration? I mean, I think about like the example I just brought up. Could some of those issues been avoided had more time been taken? The process, maybe drawn out a little bit longer instead of the eagerness to get it done. Could more of these things been uncovered if more time was allowed, or is that not really a factor?
Sure. I think that more so than time is the detail oriented and intention part, and just, not missing steps. Making sure that each step is attended to, whether you're attending to those steps quickly or slowly. I tend to think that when you're in the midst of disruptive change, as long as you're doing it skillfully, going faster is better.
Okay.
But
I agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I can't think of an example of like why you'd want to go slow, but I suppose
the reason I'm thinking you might want to go slow is you don't know what you don't know. And so if you haven't brought in someone externally, you might need more time to think through like what all the factors. But Eric, you've clearly got a comment on this.
Yeah, I was going to say, but that first of all is the importance of having a professional, whether it's a coach to help you get the business structured correctly, whether it's an M&A consultant to help you structure the deal, or whether it's someone to help you with post integration. We have a saying here around FP that says time is the biggest deal killer. We have seen transactions which were a 100% perfect cultural fit, alignment with the staff, everything was perfect, picture perfect transaction, and we couldn't get the deal done because days turned into weeks, turned into months, turned into quarters, turned into years. And we forgot the reasons why we were doing it in the first place. And so at that point, you're basically starting over.
Deal
So
fatigue.
yeah,
fatigue,
we call
yeah.
it deal fatigue. And that's why I talk about foundational elements and building momentum. As long as you're making good decisions, those are better than no decision. They don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be great decisions, but sometimes action is really what you need. And having that objective third party to say, yes, this is standard. This is normal. What you're feeling is normal, and what you're structuring is normal. Giving you that confidence to proceed. Sometimes that's what a transaction needs to get done.
It's good to be methodical, but you're not going to be able to turn over every stone. There is a bit of a leap of faith in every transaction. You've got to put faith in the fact that you've done your due diligence, you've picked the best partner out there for your organization. And if you've picked the right partner, when issues arise, you're going to work through those issues as partners do.
I also want to point out that there is so many people view the status quo as being this sort of safe place for them. And invariably what they're doing is they're actually undervaluing or under-evaluating the true risks of doing nothing. Most of the time when someone decides to back out of a transaction, it's because the cultural fit wasn't right. That doesn't mean they didn't have the problem that they came to us in the first place to solve, right? So we have to understand that the safe place is not always to go back to what you were doing in the past. Sometimes the safe place is to get out of your own way and see another perspective, or try to build that momentum, or think about things in a different way. It's not to say that we force people to do transactions. You can never do that. But people generally they overvalue the safety of the past, and they underappreciate the safety that the future can bring.
Oh boy. I mean, on so many levels, safety is just wildly unproductive. I mean, it feels good, but it's generally some sort of a facade, or, kind of a false experience, or a temporary salve.
It's a defense.
Really, some version of discomfort is where we want to be moving in and out of, like comfort, discomfort. I wanted to make a point about, the leap of faith. You might remember one of the Harrison Ford, the Indiana Jones movies, and there's a scene where he puts his foot out and has to just like step off a cliff in order for the bridge to emerge. And I love that visual. And it's almost like these leaders, as they're, I don't know, linked arms with their trusted advisors or their leadership team or kind of whoever they're in this with. And they have to kind of do that step together and trust that they've done that foundational work. This is a profession that has never, and I don't think will ever win any awards for being like really fast moving. I mean, most organizations, this is kind of aside from the M&A, experience of, these are folks who they love to analyze issues. They want to be sure. They want to have the safe move. They want to test things before they do the leap. It's very slow, which is okay. But by and large, they're going to benefit from pushing themselves to move more quickly, which takes a lot of trust. It takes being able to build that psychological safety to make mistakes, bring innovative ideas and kind of mess it up and have it be okay, and then bring an innovative idea and then mess it up again. We need more of that. Just in teams in general, and then but through this piece, the transaction piece, I agree with you that if the foundation is set and that leap of faith can occur, that's the best way to go, is move quickly.
So we're getting near the end here. I want to summarize some of the key points that I noted here today, and then give you each an opportunity to give some kind of parting thoughts. So, starting off, like, are you ready? Like, let's think about it. Are we doing everything we need to do to be ready for an acquisition, to be ready for a merger, buy side or sell side? Be thinking about non-negotiables. And I love these couple ones from Liv of uncertainty is the worst, buying is contagious, and we got to move beyond likability. I think those are all some really great points to think about as you're moving forward with this. And then the overvaluing safety of the past. I think that's a really important one to think about too. And let's keep the momentum going. We're going to have things that slow down our momentum, but we can pick it back up. And having someone alongside, whether it's someone like Liv or someone like FP, some professional help, that can be really important in what Eric said at the very beginning. This might be the most important decision of your career. So I'll just kind of go down the line as I see it from my screen perspective here. James, what are some parting thoughts that you've got, that either advice you have for advisors or things that maybe you picked up on today?
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground. Again, going back to the foundation of whether this is the right path for you is something you need to be very careful in analyzing. It's not the right path for all firms out there in the marketplace, and it's not a solve for every issue that a firm may be dealing with. If you struggle with the analysis or you want some guidance, pick up the phone, give us a call. We love talking about M&A, and we love being that consultative guide for the clients that afford us the opportunity. So email, phone, I'm available to have these conversations and to help folks with that analysis.
Eric?
My takeaway that I would like more people to understand is think further ahead than you think you need to with respect to these types of transactions and transitions, right? Whether it's internal or external, most of our clients are starting too late, and ultimately what that does is it limits their options. And once we sort of break down that group of all those stakeholders, remember it's your clients, your staff, and your family, they start to understand that these are big issues that need to be solved, and sometimes they can take a while just to take that first step. Because as we just discussed, once you take that first step, you do want to be consistently building momentum to get to a good outcome for you and the rest of the people involved.
And Liv, as someone who has made a career out of helping leaders with change management, this is usually something that's going to result in a lot of changes. So what are some parting thoughts on how to have a successful integration by properly dealing with these changes?
Well, I mean, at the highest level, I think a phrase to lean on is start as you mean to go on. So, whether you're at the point of having a conversation with a potential partner or you're integrating your leadership team, don't gloss over the parts that are really meaningful around building good habits around communication, honesty, trust, and openness. Those kinds of capabilities get ignored way too often, and they are absolutely the epitome of sinking or swimming.
Awesome. Thank you all. This was a really great discussion. Appreciate everyone participating today. We will have resources available for everyone. Like I mentioned, we've got our acquisition readiness assessment. We'll have a replay available for this after the live version of it. And then certainly we'll provide more information that you can get in touch with Liv Olson Consulting. So if you're in need of executive coaching, change management, she's available to help with that. And I'm imagining there's a lot of our M&A clients that are going to need some of her services as well. So thanks everyone for your time today, and we'll see you next time.